Pat Mayo Hour.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Hour DraftKings breakdown for UFC Brisbane. Of course, I don't know everything there is to know about MMA. That's why, Cody Saftik, every time that you hear me mispronounce a name, you know what you're going to hear? That would be correct. So, let's get right into this. I want to win some money. Last time out, you gave me a GPP lineup, and you gave the peoples a GPP lineup that, well, it won me $1,000. So
it was hot fire.
That was nice. And it had Conor McGregor in it after I explicitly said, should we fade Conor McGregor?
You actually, good point. That's why we're a good team here, right? You know the fantasy side of things. I know the fight side of things. And hopefully we can combine those two and make some money.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we did win money. So we've done 4 of these shows so far in 2016. We were 3 of 4 in the cash lineups, and that's a full double up. When these lineups cash, they cash. That's the one fun thing about MMA. So let's get to it. Let's see if we can make it 4 of 5, win some more GPPs. And I want to start at the top. Mark Hunt versus Frank Mir, who must be, I don't know, 87 years old at this point?
Yeah, he's actually 5 years younger than Mark Hunt.
What?
He's 36.
So is Mark Hunt Australian then?
Yeah, he is.
Is that why he's on this card?
That is pretty much exactly why he's on this card. He's basically the local hometown guy. He generally doesn't always fight over in Australia, but if they're going to be in that part of the world, they generally like to have the Super Samoan on, and he always delivers a good show, so he's worth having.
Mark Hunt's 10-3. Frank Mir is 9-1 on DraftKings. Mir is the underdog at plus 145. Do you have any? Is this a 5-rounder?
Yeah, 5-rounder.
Do you have any interest in this fight, DraftKings-wise?
Well, to be perfectly honest, 9-1 for Frank Mir, that is value like you would not believe. I mean, Frank Mir
circled.
Frank Mir is a guy that even if you look at the betting line, it's relatively close. Mark Hunt is the favorite. In my opinion, this is a 50-50 fight. And if Mark Hunt wins, he's going to knock Frank Mir out. If Frank Mir wins, he's going to submit Mark Hunt. He has not only a good chance of winning the fight, Pat, if he does win the fight, and I believe him to win the fight.
Quickly?
No, not necessarily quickly. As you mentioned, 5-round fight. I think he gets it done in 3, 4, or 5. Mark Hunt has been in more 5-round fights than Frank Mir. He actually, I'm not going to say has a better gas
he's
tank.
130 years old. Of course he has. He's just been in more fights.
That's exactly it. And if you look at his pro record, it's 11 wins, 10 losses, and a draw. I mean, he does not have a ground game. He's a former kickboxing champion. He's fantastic on the feet. If you stand with him, bad things are going to go your way. Unfortunately, people know that. So they just take him to the ground, and he's not exactly very good on the ground. He's working to improve, but he's 41 years old. His birthday's in like 2 weeks. He'll be 42 years old. He's taken a lot of wear and tear in his career. And you know that age-old tale. It's like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. He has learned a couple new tricks, just certainly not what Frank Mir knows in the ground department. So at 9-1, I play that. I'm not going to say all day, but yeah, I'm playing that pretty much all day here. And for 10-3, if you're a Mark Hunt fan, he's worth having too. He's kind of well-priced, and if he's going to win, he's going to get you a lot of points. I'm just kind of staying away from him.
Would you play Frank Mir on a cash team?
I would not play him on a cash team just because if he loses, he's going to get knocked out. And could he get knocked out in the first minute of the first round? Yeah, he could. Could he get knocked out in the second round? Yeah. Anything past the second round, I think it's going to be in his wheelhouse.
So the longer it goes, the more it favors.
So for my GPP, I'll take a poke on that. I'll take a poke on that all day. But for my cash game team, it's like, the chances of him getting smoked in the face and going down, it is a real chance. As I said, this is a 50-50 fight. Both men have, a good opportunity to win it. So I'm going to avoid that for cash game played on the GPP.
Neil Magny versus Hector Lombard. Hector Lombard has 39 fights, at least according to his pro record, 34-4-1. It's a lot.
Yeah, and you know what? He's another Australian guy. He's undefeated in Australia. He's like 20.
Does he ever fight anyone good in Australia, though? Like, I've heard of Neil Magny.
Yeah, fair enough. But you know why? One reason you may not have heard of Hector Lombard, you have, but you don't remember Hector Lombard is he tested positive for steroids his last fight, and he's actually been on the bench for over 12 months. So this is a reintroduction into the welterweight division. As I mentioned, he's undefeated in Australia. The problem is he's way shorter than Neil Magny. Not necessarily shorter, but he's given up something like 8 inches in reach. Neil Magny has an 80-inch reach. That is absolutely huge. And Neil Magny's so smart, so well calculated, he's just going to look to keep Hector Lombard on the outside. I got Hector Lombard winning this fight. Hector Lombard's got a mad amount of power. I think he does get the job done. But is this a fight that I want to put on my GPP? We'll talk about that in a little bit. It might just be a Hector Lombard unanimous decision. I feel pretty safe that he gets the win, but I don't feel safe by no means that he's going to get a finish. So I'd like to play a guy like Hector Lombard on my cash game, avoid him on GPP for the most part. He could get the knockout. But Neil Magny, respect where respect is due. The guy is tough and durable.
I remember watching the Canada versus Australia season of Tough Nations with you, and everyone on the Australian team was basically a scrub.
Fair enough. So Hector Lombard has been living in Florida for the past 10 years training at American Top Team.
Okay, so he's basically he's an American fighter at this point. He just happens to be Australian.
100%. He also competed at the Olympics for Australia and picked up, I believe, a bronze medal in judo. So he's got the ground game. He's got the striking game. He's been living stateside for the past 10 years. Literally everything's come together. The one big question mark people are talking about is, well, if he tested positive for his last fight in steroids, and he's looked great, right? He looked good his last number of fights. If he's not on steroids anymore, is there going to be some drastic difference? Because Neil Magny's a clean athlete, and he gets better every time. So we're going to get a Neil Magny that's currently getting better every time versus a Hector Lombard that might be coming on the way down. But to be perfectly honest with you, I think that even at this stage in Hector Lombard's career, as opposed to Neil Magny, I still think he's the better guy.
From what you've told me about these two fights so far, I don't feel like I want to own any of these guys.
Well, it's a tough card, to be honest with you.
Is it?
It's a tough card, and Hector Lombard's somebody who has, once again, good pricing on him if somebody that you want to play.
All right. Is there a quick finish anywhere on this card that we have to have on every one of our teams?
Yeah. Now, listen, I disrespect this guy quite a bit, but Dan Kelly, he was actually on Team Australia on that season of The Ultimate Fighter, Canada versus Australia. Speaking of judo and speaking of the Olympics, this guy went to the Olympics for judo, Pat. 4 different times.
How old is this guy?
He's 38 years old, but he is the oldest 38 that you've ever seen. Both of his knees completely shot, blown out. He's very slow. He has no footwork whatsoever. His opponent, Antonio Carlos Jr., another guy out of American Top Team. He's young, 26.
$11,000 on DraftKings. He
11-1,
better win.
11-1, I think.
I have 11 here, so maybe that is wrong.
Yeah, either way, he better get the finish, and I think he's going to get the finish. And as you mentioned, what are some fights on the card that scream finish, scream finish, scream finish? When you look at it top to bottom, it's like, okay, James Tahuna, the local New Zealand guy fighting in Australia, but he's been on for 2 years, so what are you going to get out of him? Antonio Carlos Jr., good God, this guy's huge, Pat. He actually won Ultimate Fighter Brazil as a heavyweight. And then in his next fight, went down to light heavyweight. Now he's fighting at middleweight. He's 6'1", 185 pounds, has a 75-inch reach. I think he's going to carve up Dan Kelly. Dan Kelly's only path to victory here is get a little foot sweep, get the fight to the ground. And if he does get to the fight to the ground, well, now you're dealing with the world champion BJJ black belt. So he's going to try to keep the fight standing. And if he does, he doesn't have the reach. He doesn't have the striking. He doesn't have the punch resistance. He's probably going to get KO'd. I think it's a fairly quick finish, if not the first round, second round. I don't mean to disrespect Dan Kelly by no means. He's a veteran of the game, but I think Antonio Carlos Jr. is just too much for him.
Anyone else? Quick finish that we can afford on our lineups?
James Tahuna. James Tahuna's taking on Steve Bossa from Montreal.
Bossa.
Yeah, actually he's from Quebec. I shouldn't say he's actually from Montreal, but he trains out of Le Pro Gym Saint-Jean.
Is that with Jocelyn Pierre?
Absolutely not. It's not. I mean, people always say, oh, he trains at TriStar. He trains at TriStar. He trains at this TriStar Longueuil, which is
Longueuil.
Yeah.
It's a suburb of Montreal.
Yeah, it's just like, it's a suburb of Montreal.
Like A-Rap, maybe from there.
Yeah, Director A-Rap.
Where are you from?
Hampstead. Don't know what that is. I'm sure they're close by.
It's probably another suburb of Montreal, you know?
So Steve Bossa, this guy's actually a former...
Like a Bossa.
He's a hockey player, Pat. He's a hockey enforcer.
Oh, is he the goon?
I
remember this guy.
So he lasted all of like 29 seconds in his UFC debut. I don't really expect him to last. Yeah, I expect him to maybe last more than 29 seconds. But James Tahuna is an MMA fighter. They actually do match up fairly well against each other, but James Tahuna, if he can even show up 75, 80% of what he used to be, I think he crushes Steve Bossa. And when you look at a price of $10,500, is expensive, but can you afford him? Absolutely. Can you afford him on cash games and GPP? Absolutely. A little bit risky because he's been off for so long, but I like him.
Anyone else? That may be a value play, because right now we're talking about a guy that's $11,000, a guy that's $10,500. We're going to need some savings somewhere. You mentioned Frank Mir. He's only $9,100, but you didn't love him for cash. Is there anyone else down in that range, maybe in the 8,000s, maybe in the low 9,000s that we can squeeze onto the team?
Well, for my GPP, because I'm not going to say I ran out of money, but at the same time for GPP,
you ran out of money.
Yeah, well, what you end up with is someone who's going to be below $9,000. And at $9,000, you always get 4 or 5 guys, and when you look at them, you're like, I don't like either of those 4 or 5 guys. Brendan O'Reilly, and I know I'm going to take some flack for this. This is a guy that definitely has some potential here. $8,200.
He is a minus 460. He's the biggest underdog on the card.
I think Dan Kelly's the biggest underdog in the card.
Not according to this.
Wow, there you go. But Brendan O'Reilly, bear with me on this, right? First of all, Australian guy. He's all scrapper. Literally, that's all this guy is. He's so scrappy. He's so tenacious.
Can he last?
Well, he's a natural 55er and he fights at 170, right? So that would presume that he's got more gas in the tank, but no, because he's dealing with bigger bodies all the time, it gasses him out. What he can do, though, Pat, is he can last 2 rounds.
Okay, that's fine.
Win 2 rounds, and then he gets really tired, but he's never been knocked down in his pro career. He's never been submitted in his pro career. he's been submitted on the Ultimate Fighter, but
He can get to. You think he can get to a decision in this match?
I think he can squeak out an ugly split decision.
If that's
victory.
fine. Hey, listen, for $8,200, you get to the decision, and I can afford all these other expensive guys. I'm good with that.
That's what I'm all about here, right? Because it's a GPP. So if I can get 3 or 4 finishes on my top 4 guys, then great. If Brandon O'Reilly can squeak me out a split decision and score me 50, 60 points, I'm over the moon. And to be perfectly honest, Alan Joban, not only is this a guy
Is he also from Longueuil?
No, he's from California.
No, that's no fun.
I know. Alan Joban. He's a model. He's a 34-year-old model. In his last fight, he got completely starched, knocked out in the first round. And then you got to think, when you're 34 years old and you got a promising career outside of the UFC, how much do you want to wake up early in the morning? How much do you want to push this? We got this Brendan O'Reilly. He's a young kid. He's trying to open up his own gym. He's 26, 27 years old. He's really scrappy and tenacious.
By the way,
and
you
styles
can't,
make
you
fights.
can't call people a young kid that are older than you.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So he's a young-ish
He's a young adult?
This man is a young adult with aspirations and dreams, Pat.
He
wants to make those dreams come true.
He is an entrepreneur.
So
he has the spirit.
This would be a big fight for him.
And the other guy is a fighter / model.
He's
and
a
not
model,
the other way around.
The Alan Joban is so hot right now.
Any other fight you want to talk about that you think deserves to be in cash consideration or GPP consideration?
Absolutely. So for cash consideration, I like Johnny Case. He's actually taken on...
He's on the case.
Yeah, he's on the case. He's taking on Jake Matthews, once again, another veteran of that season of Canada versus Australia. Jake Matthews is 21 years old, Pat. He's a young kid. He's younger than I am. He's so young that he will be a legitimate contender someday, but that time's not now. We got Johnny Case, a 26-year-old young adult. He's really firing on all cylinders, and the biggest disadvantage that he's going to have is that he needs to go to Australia and take on someone who's Australian. He's got to go and be able to deal with that pressure in that flight. But this is a guy that has gone to Japan in the UFC and beaten a Japanese fighter. He's gone to Mexico and he's beaten a Mexican fighter. He's gone to Brazil and he's beaten a Brazilian fighter. His MO seems to be going into people's backyards and ruining their night. And I think he's got a very legitimate chance of doing that again here. Do I see it being as a finish? Quite possibly. Not because he's got the skills to go out there and finish Jake Matthews, but Jake Matthews being so young, he tends to break a little bit. As the going gets tough, I know he came back against Akbar Theriola, but the longer you take him, the more he's going to show his inexperience, the more Johnny Case has an opportunity to pounce on him and get that win. So Johnny Case for cash games, I definitely do like that.
Both $9,700, the betting line, equal -110, so this is a essential coin flip fight.
It's a very close fight. And to be perfectly honest, if you took Jake Matthews in 3 or 4 years against Johnny Case, Jake Matthews smokes him. But he's getting a very young Jake Matthews, and this is the time to exploit him.
Well, who was the young guy that got submitted like 3 weeks ago?
Sage Northcutt. And Jake Matthews was angling to fight him, being like, I really want to fight this. We're both young. I want the kind of push that he's getting. You can tell that these are the things he wants. But when you look at his 3 wins in the UFC, because he's 3-1 in the UFC, all 3 guys that he's defeated in the UFC no longer are employed by the UFC. So he's fought a very low-level guys. When we look at Johnny Case, his last fight against Jan Cabral, I mean, that's a guy that by most people's standards is a highly regarded veteran, but a BJJ black belt at a Nova União. And not only did he beat him, he looked good. He really did.
Let's get to your rosters. Cash roster.
Okay, rosters.
Hit me. Cash game roster for UFC Brisbane on DraftKings. Let's hear it.
Okay, Antonio Carlos Jr., that's our mainstay here. $11,100. He's big, he's strong. If the fight stays standing, he's got a great chance of finishing. If the fight hits the ground, he's got a great chance of finishing. So literally versatile, that's what we're looking for. James Tahuna, $10,500. I would assume he's going to be highly owned, to be honest with you.
That's fine. Cash games, doesn't matter.
Yeah, we need him to get the win, and I think that's exactly what he's going to do. I think he does get a finish in this particular fight, but even if he doesn't get the finish, it should be a 3-round thrashing. He gets the win bonus. He wins all 3 rounds. He lands significant strikes. I like it. Moving on, we got Johnny Case, $9,700. As I mentioned, upset specialist going to people's backyards. But honestly, Pat, this is a guy that he's young. He's taking his career seriously. Sky's the limit for him. He's very versatile as well. I definitely like him.
I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
Johnny Case.
Hollywood is his nickname.
It makes sense because his name sounds like it was created by like
Mortal Kombat.
No, not even that. He sounds like he's like a detective on like a bad CBS thing. He could be the star of Castle.
Yeah, fair enough.
On ABC.
That show was good, and then it really got to me.
Castle?
Yeah, like 2 seasons in.
I'm convinced it doesn't actually exist because no one's ever watched it.
It could
star Johnny Case. I don't know.
I used to have this really weirdo buddy. He used to live in his like basement apartment
and watch
just
Castle.
Watch Castle all day long.
That's
man.
a sad fucking life, man.
Yeah. I made it through 2 seasons, and then I was just like, I gotta stop hanging out with this guy.
All right, so those are the 3 that you like. We've talked about them. Who are the other 2 that make the cash game?
Hector Lombard, we talked about him as well. $9,600. I think a safe pick. Does he get the finish? I don't think so, but is he a safe pick? I believe him to be, and I think he'll score
Gets
a decent
decision,
amount.
probably wins by decision.
Absolutely. And then Frank Mir, $9,100. Frank Mir will get the finish if he does win. If he loses, he will be finished. However, I'm on Team Mir here. I think he gets the finish. $9,100. I mean, come on. What more could you want from that? He's a value play, and he's a value play with a huge opportunity. And listen, this is not a value play that you're getting that is a 3-1 underdog. Look at the line.
It's plus 145.
Plus 145 is not bad.
He's essentially
$9,100.
It's an MMA fight. We just watch people that were minus 800 get knocked out. So
Again, check this. Mark Hunt's got 6 losses by submission. All 6 of them come by way of arm lock. Arm bar, key lock, Americana. It doesn't matter. You can take this guy's arm, a Kimura, and you can break it. Frank Mir, he loves arm locks.
He got Brock Lesnar to submit, didn't he?
With a leg lock. However, yeah, this guy is... There's jiu-jitsu and there's high-level jiu-jitsu, and he's high-level jiu-jitsu. Mark Hunt, he's serviceable jiu-jitsu, but if the fight hits the ground and he's fatigued, and in the 3rd round at 42 years old, he will be fatigued, then it's Frank Mir's wheelhouse here, so that's why I went with Mir.
GPP roster for UFC Brisbane. Any significant changes from your cash game?
Basically, the only significant change here is that we still got Mir, we still got Carlos Jr., we still got James Tahuna, right? Instead of going Johnny Case.
Big Tahuna.
Yeah, instead of taking Johnny Case, we're taking Dan Hooker.
Ooh.
Dan Hooker.
TJ Hooker. Let's hear about it.
Exactly. Now, he's from New Zealand, so I don't want to say he's a local boy because he's not Australian. He's from New Zealand. But this guy's tenacious, Pat. When he wins by finish. That's what he does. He gets on guys and he finishes them. He is extremely... and not only that, you can't put him away. Remember, there used to be a joke back in the day because he took out a fight where he got split right in the head. Like, his head almost split in half. He fought to the end. And the whole thing was... Hooker leaves with a bloody gash. That was the headline, right? But
that's an aggressive headline.
That's what I don't know who wrote it, but I was like, oh wow. But literally, I'm a big fan of Dan Hooker. He's a young kid. He's always getting better, and he's a guy that would have been good just fighting out of New Zealand. He could have been a serviceable featherweight fighting out of New Zealand. Nope, he decides to pack up his entire camp. He moves over to the Elevation Fight Team over in Denver, Colorado. He's working at a professional grade strength and conditioning gym. He's working at one of the best gyms in the country in terms of MMA, and not only that, he's living with this Neil Magny, who's fighting also on the card. I don't think he's going to win, but living with other fighters, like-minded guys, all getting ready for the same night. That's
professionals
be huge
too.
For you.
Guys push each other, you get the training in.
Yes.
You make sure that no one's slacking off, unless everyone slacks off together.
Now, Markadiva's a tough guy. His opponent Markadiva is a very tough guy, but he's a
diva. Like
exactly. So now you got a diva versus a hooker. It's like who are you gonna take?
You take the grit.
The hooker will do anything to win, okay? And that's why we're going with Dan Hooker. He will find a way to win, and not only will he find a way to win, there's a very high probability he finds a way to finish. For $10,600, I'm willing to play him here. We still got Frank Mir, we got the Dan Hooker, and then that's where we're gonna go with Brendan O'Reilly.
O'Reilly.
I made an asterisk here.
$8,200.
No one's gonna play this guy whatsoever, and you can use him, and that'll be able to afford you the luxury of affording everybody else, and he can get the win.
Let me ask you this then:
Yes.
You have $500 left on the table. Is O'Reilly really a better play than Damian Brown at $8,600, who you could also afford?
Damian Brown's taking the fight on about a week's notice.
So no,
he's taking on a Brazilian wrestling champion.
So who else would fit into that range?
Well, you could
Daniel
switch.
Kelly, who you don't like, you think he gets knocked out.
Oh yeah.
So O'Reilly's the guy that you go with, and leaving the money on the table does help differentiate your team in a GPP.
And if you're sitting at home and you're thinking to yourself, you know what, guys, maybe you're Australian, maybe you're from New Zealand, whatever it is. Maybe you don't like Frank Mir. Maybe you think to yourself, these guys are idiots. Mir's going to get blasted. You have the money to switch Mir out for Hector Lombard. Now, the only reason I didn't is I think Hector Lombard's going to win a decision. I think Mir's going to get the finish. So I'm personally going for the finish, especially on a GPP.
Yeah.
But a lot of people think Hector Lombard's got the power to knock out any man in the world, Neil Magny included. And if that's your true feelings, switch it up by all means.
Cody Saftik. Check him out on the Bookie Beatdown on the Fight Network, along with Paul O'Shaughnessy, and follow him on Twitter at CJ Saftik. You can follow me on Twitter at the PME, and remember, subscribe to the Pat Mayo Hour on YouTube and iTunes and Stitcher and Podomatic, and all places where multimedia lives under the Pat Mayo Hour. Pat Mayo, and I'll see you next time.